Welcome, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Goodman, Director of Marketing and Development for the YMCA of Northwest Louisiana. And we're here at 318 Latino Studios for Shreveport-Bossier, my city, my community, my home. And we've got an absolute first today. My guest is my mom, Sylvia Goodman. Mom?
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. All right, so we're gonna kind of do a different format today. Generally, I have a bunch of different questions, and I've got them written down, and I'm reading them. With you, we're only gonna have two things that we mainly focus on. Before we get started, though, I want to say first, I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing here without you. So I wanted to credit you for inspiring me to do this work. And then we're going to talk about two projects today. We're going to talk about two major additions to Shreveport-Bossier, Sci-Port and the Robinson Film Center. And I'm simply going to go on record and say, even though many people were involved in both of those projects, neither of those projects would exist if it weren't for you.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but...
I'm sure about that. So with that said, let's start today. I want you to just take me through from start to finish how Sci-Port came to be.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was a science teacher at Midway Junior High for 4 years, and then I went to LSUS the first year it opened as a biology and a zoology teacher. And I became involved with Sci-Port because the other biology teacher was at that time Dot Hubble, who became Dot Katie later. And Dot was involved with a group that I wasn't involved with. And she ringed me in. And this group was a group that formed in 1990. Actually, I think it was in 1986 because there was a fossil exhibit at the Revel. And it was one of the most popular things at the Revel. And every year the kids just loved it. And so this group said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have something permanent like this instead of 1 week a year? And so this was a group headed by Bruce Simon, and Dot Katie was a member of this group. They, in 1990, they brought in their first traveling exhibit, Gateway to China, and that was at the Commercial National Bank building. Then the next year, they brought in a second one into St. Vincent's Mall called Dynamation Dinosaurs. Both of these exhibits were hugely successful, way beyond their imagination.
And let me interrupt 1 second. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting at 619 Market Street in the Petroleum Building in 318 Latino Studios. You mentioned Commercial National Bank building, which I think is just right across the street from where we are right now. Right. Now the Regent's Tower. Is that correct?
Yes. So anyway, that's both of those were just immensely successful. So this group have formed a planning committee, and with the board's approval, hired Slack A-Lost in Marymount to bring in a renowned Science Center consultant, Peter Anderson, from England. And together, over a period of months and a cost of $50,000, the group, consultant, and architects developed the facility site summary. I was part of this group. And let me interrupt
one more time. Slack A-Lost, for those who don't know, they were developers in town, commercial?
They were architects.
Architects,
right,
okay.
Yeah. They were a major architectural firm. They did a lot of state contracts. And I think that this group that I was a part of interviewed a number of architects and decided on this group. And once I was brought into this group, I realized the potential that this group had. But the thing that was missing was fundraising. And so anyway, in 1992, the group, completed a facility site summary, and the mayor and Carolyn Dowling, who was a member of this group, who had chaired Mayor Beard's campaign and was very politically savvy, which I wasn't at the time. She kind of was my teacher about politics and how to deal with legislators and city councilmen and Caddo commissioners and Bossier commissioners and all.
Which all this will be a recurring theme as we move through both Sci-Port finally coming to fruition and the film center.
Right, exactly. It all depended on money, and we don't have
political
enough
support and involvement.
Well, the money had to come from not just individuals, but from government entities. And at that time, I had no experience. Now, the experience I had was I had chaired the Regional Science Fair for 2 years. So with that experience, I had to get judges for every science fair in every elementary school, every junior high, and every high school in 2 parishes, Caddo and Bossier. And I had to attend every single science fair. And when I attended these science fairs and I was talking to the elementary school teachers, I had a recurring theme. We're supposed to teach science. And one of the reasons we're elementary teachers is because we were terrible in science. And we didn't expect to have to teach science and help kids do exhibits and all. And so I kept hearing this over and over and over again, and it resonated with me. And I said, well, if we're going to have a science center, we have to address this issue. This is a real significant issue. And so one of my goals was to get an educator from Caddo and an educator from Bossier, funded by their school systems, to come into our science center and take the textbooks that these elementary teachers were teaching and teach them how to do experiments and how to teach the lessons, and also even how to get the supplies to do the experiments, because they didn't even know how to order the supplies. And so this was a real goal for me because I saw that need, and it was over and over and over again. And that probably was my real motivation, because I had taught science and I was trained to teach science. And I thought, what if I'd been thrown into this without any background? And that's what happens to elementary teachers. So anyway, we continued meetings with the mayor and with individual city councilmen and to enlist their support for the project, both in Caddo and Bossier. And in 1992, Carolyn Dowling and I and Hazel Beard met with the legislature, the state legislature. And this is a crazy story. So Carolyn came in with this artist rendering of a science center. And this is what we're going to take down to Baton Rouge to this breakfast and sell this to the legislators. And I said, Carolyn, that's make-believe. We haven't even talked about what a science center looks like, where it's going to be. And she said, it's going to take 10 years to get this project done. Do you think in 10 years anyone's going to remember this drawing? And I said, well, I guess not. And so that's what we used. And we had this breakfast. And we got the state legislature to come up with $1 million for planning. And now the next issue was, okay, this is going to take years to raise all this money, and how are we going to generate interest in our local community? So I had been attending national meetings of science centers and large screen centers, 2 separate meetings, and I got to know science center directors all over the country and even from Europe. And so every time I would
and
sit down...
who was paying for you to attend these meetings, and who was...
Your father.
Okay.
Yeah, there was no money. So your dad is who funded all my travel. And one of the meetings I went to, I was having breakfast with the head of the San Diego Science Center. And I said, we don't know how to start to generate the interest. And I've asked this question to a number of science center directors, but they've all come into science centers, existing science centers, and no one's been able to answer my question. And she said, well, I can answer it because I started the way you started. She said, you create a storefront, small center, and show the public what a science center can be, what it does, and I promise you it will be a big success. And then they'll want more, and then they'll be willing to pay for more. So I said, okay. So I took that back to the board, and they said, yeah. So we had to find a location, and we used Jody's place on the corner of Milam and Commerce. We rented that. It was actually a party space, and we rented it. And then, okay, so we got to have science exhibits. So we applied to the Junior League. At that point, we had a young director, Karen Wimberly. And Karen...
who's still in Shreveport.
Yes.
Karen Hartner, for
Karen
those of you who are listening.
And at that point, she was a college student, working part-time as the director for the Science Center. So, but Karen was an amazing grant writer, and I like to write grants as well. So Karen and I pooled our knowledge and wrote grants to the Junior League, who was celebrating their 60th anniversary. Is that right? Yeah, I think it's their 60th anniversary. And we got a grant from them, and we got a grant from the National Science Foundation, so we had our first $100,000 to buy exhibits. Now we needed another $100,000, we figured, for operations, to hire a director, to have a salary, and just for operations, and we raised that money locally. And we wrote a grant to the Shreveport-Bossier Convention Center, and we got a $200,000 grant. So we had enough to keep going, and then we started raising money from individuals. We had a party, a kickoff party, and we raised money. It's in Shreve Square. And,
so what year are we at this point?
We're at 1993, I think. And anyway, 1994 is when our center opened, our interim center. I also was friends with Bill Joyce, and I asked Bill, would he design a mural for the side of the building, and it's still there. And I asked him also, I said, we need a mascot for the center. So he designed a mascot, and we had a huge costume made. And at events, we would have this character that we called Rolly. We called, he had another name, I can't remember the exact name, but this character, Bill took this character and it became Roly Poly Oly eventually in his books and all. So that generated a lot of interest. The kids, for some reason, well, because it was a magical costume, anyway.
Let me interrupt 1 second, because he's been on the sofa, and I know you were very instrumental in his career. So is Mike McSwain involved yet? And tell me a little bit while you're here how Mike got to be involved, because, well, I'll let you tell it and I may add to it.
Okay. All right. So the group had hired Slack Alost and Marymount, the architectural firm. Mike had been in Lufkin, Texas as an architect, and he had just moved from Lufkin to Shreveport to work at Slack Alost and Marymount. And he was one of the 2 architects that they assigned to me. So I worked directly with Mike and one other architect to design the permanent structure. So we worked closely for several years. I mean, almost daily, meeting. And also that we had this professional exhibit designer from England, Peter Anderson, that I mentioned. And so Peter would, give us, I actually had ideas that I wanted incorporated. And one of my concepts was, I don't want this to be a generic science center. I don't want it to be one that could be located in Chicago or New York City or somewhere. I wanted to have a Shreveport stamp on it. And what is significant scientifically about Shreveport? And for me, it's the Red River, because that's really how Shreveport got started, unclogging the log jam. It's also a big thing. I mean, our casino's located on the Red River, but even way before that, it was a mode of transportation. And so I said to Peter right off the bat, I want a Red River gallery. And I also met with Skipper Dixon, and who is a big authority on the Red. And I said, Skipper, I want a little theater where people can come in with a film, but I want objects to light up in the theater. And so when you're talking about maybe a giant turtle or something, there'll be a giant turtle actually in the theater, And Skipper wrote the script, and Peter designed the theater, and that was part of the Red River Gallery. And we got this mock steamboat, and then I also thought, this is a cotton area. And so got a little miniature cotton gin in there where kids could actually gin cotton. And
at this point, we're still in the temporary.
We're still there planning the big building, yeah. And so we're still raising money. And in 1996, the building plans were completed, and the project went out for public bids in 1996. Oh.
And when the project plans came back, what was the estimated cost of the project at the time?
I'm thinking, I really don't remember exactly, but when the final plans came back, it was $20 million, and so we ended up with that was for exhibits as well. So we raised, the state gave us $8.5 million, the city gave us $7.5 million, and then we, and when I say we, not I did not raise money from individuals. My job was to raise money from government entities, and but we had Bubba Raspberry, we had Whit Carruthers, we had Cindy Wood, and Al Childs, and these are the ones who raised the $4 million from the individuals and businesses. I had nothing to do with that.
And do you want to share anything? I mean, it is a common verb, but it's a little misleading. You say, the state gave us X million, the city gave us, no one gave you anything. It was a massive undertaking, a massive process. Do you want to share anything about, you don't have to, no one just gave you anything. It took monstrous amount of work to obtain that funding and support.
Right. And you're absolutely right. We were totally indebted to state senators at that time, and Foster Campbell was one. Greg Barrow actually got the first $1 million for planning. We had Wayne Waddell. We had Greg Tarver. And I can tell you a funny story about that, because I guess maybe the fourth or fifth time I'd been down to the legislature to ask for money and had not gotten it. And I could not get the Black Caucus aboard. And so my friend Dottie Bell went with me down.
Who's currently still and has been for a long time a Caddo Parish School Board member.
Yes. And prior to that, the reason I knew her and the reason I picked her to go with me is for a number of years she was an 8th grade teacher. And she had a Louisiana Day, and every Politico came to her day. And the kids met all of these politicos, the statewide, the local. And so I knew that Dottie knew all of them personally. And I took her down with me. And my big problem was the Black Caucus. And Dottie got in their faces, Greg Tarver and others, and said, "You see this woman? She can take her children to a science center anywhere in the world. She don't need a science center in Shreveport. It's our babies that need it. They're not going to be able to go to a science center unless it's right here. And so you need to understand she's not doing it for her and her children or her friends' children. She's doing it more for our children, and you need to get on board with it." So Dottie really made a difference down in the legislature. They listened to Dottie. And so very interesting story, too. We have all of our money that we need in the capital outlay bill. And I got a call from Representative Billy Montgomery, who by now has become my dear friend, as well as Foster Campbell. I've become close with both of them because it helped Sci-Port so much. And Billy Montgomery calls and he says, "You need to get down here immediately. Today." He says, "They're pulling your funding." And I said, "Oh my gosh, Billy." I said, "What is the nicest restaurant in Baton Rouge?" And he said, "Juban's." I said, "Okay, get your staff to call Juban's, make a dinner reservation for tonight for husbands and dates or wives, and I will be there to do a dog and pony show." So I got on the phone and I called Whit Carruthers and I said, "Whit, we're headed to Baton Rouge. We're putting on a dog and pony show tonight for the legislators." And he said, "Okay." So I drove and picked up Whit, and we got all of our Sci-Port paraphernalia to do this show. And we went down and we had a dinner for the legislators, paid for by your daddy. And the next morning, they gave us the funding. So that was our big funding for Sci-Port. And once we got that, I knew it was going to happen, But I mean, it came this close to being off the table. And thanks to Billy Montgomery's call and his staff, we got it, the money. So I learned a lesson from that. And
Which was,
you got to have friends that really want to help you. And B, you can't waste any time, and you can't waste an opportunity. You better jump on it when it happens, because it may not ever happen again. And that has been the case. I've watched other organizations make that mistake, that they didn't jump on something, and I guess that's just years of watching. So that was, we got the money, and then the next big issue was site. I wanted down at Stoner, down where there's that big open area at Stoner and Clyde Fant, because there's the woods next to it, and there's a boat launch there. So I had envisioned the whole thing with summer camps where the kids do nature trails and all of that. And I never really knew the answer, but it was determined that there was garbage and all underneath, and the remediation was going to be so expensive that it ruled out that site. And I'm not sure that was ever really the case, but we had to take the politician's word for it. So then the casinos were coming. So the city appointed a committee to do all this planning for the downtown in conjunction with the casinos. And one of the things on the plan was putting Sci-Port in the parking lot where the parking garage is across from Barnwell. Very small, limited space, no room for expansion, no room for parking, okay, and no view of the river. Oh, I forgot to mention, so way back, Carolyn Dowling and the mayor and I went to see Buddy, our governor, Buddy Romer, and Buddy gave us our first money. Well, he did it mainly because Buddy and I were friends. Okay, we had been friends. We had done a fundraiser for Buddy, and we had known his mother and daddy, had gone to breakfast at his parents' house to meet previous governors, and Edwin Edwards especially. And so we got this first big money from Buddy, and it was because of my relationship with Buddy. And Hazel decided, now she wanted a riverfront park. So almost all of the money went to create the riverfront park instead of to Sci-Port. So that's why we have a riverfront park. So that's just a kind of a side story. But I couldn't say anything because I wanted her support for the project. So I just said, okay, we'll wait till next time will be our turn. And actually, I ended up going to 3 different governors before we got all of our money. And I can remember Edwin.
And tell quickly what Foster likes to say about you and Governor Foster.
Actually, when Governor Foster was campaigning, and we had an event up here. And he said, tell that, I think he called me the science woman, tell that science woman she can have anything she wants if she just won't come down here again. And I said, fine, I don't care to go down to Baton Rouge again and ask for money. I'll take whatever. And he did. He came through. And then years later, Edwin Edwards had not warmed up to me particularly. And there was a young girl on the mayor's staff that would go down with us, with the mayor. And she was very young and very attractive. And he was always focused on her and really would shove me to the side. So then years later, when he ran against David Duke, I was one of the people that in the key slots up in North Louisiana fundraising for him. And so we were in a little group one night, and he turned to me, I think it was Jeffrey Kallenberg, and I can't remember who else. Anyway, there were about 5 of us, and he turned to me and he said, I bet you never thought you'd be fundraising for me, did you, Sylvia? And I said, no, I absolutely didn't. And he said, just shows you, you know. And he and Gus Majalis were good friends. And Gus actually was a big help to me, too, because when I went down to Governor Edwards, he really had no interest in a science center. But Gus called him and said, this is an important thing, and this lady's trying to do something good. Listen to her, you know. And so he did, and he did help. But it wasn't because of me. It was because of Gus. So let's see what else. So anyway, the project with this site thing, there was a guy named Bob Allen that was head of that committee, and Bob was determined that it was going to be, Sci-Port was going to be there. He really didn't think Sci-Port was very important. It was just something he had to stick on that map. And I raised a big furor, and I wanted it on the river. Well, Bill Weiner wanted it where the water pump plant is, the old pumping station. And so Bill would come to city council and say, it needs to go there. It's the perfect place and perfect. But of course, he never gave a penny nor raised, helped in any way. And so Bill and I would have battles, but people would listen to him. City councilmen would listen to him because he was an architect and I was a housewife, So we went on Kill Radio, and I finally just said to him, Bill, that is not true. You're telling a lie. That is absolutely not true. None of the people involved with Sci-Port want it at the pump station. It is the wrong place. Our advisors that we've hired don't want it there, and we're not going there. And so the city council was still listening to him, and the mayor, Hazel Beard. And so Carolyn Dowling, who was very politically savvy, said, okay, Sylvia, we're about to lose the money. We're dressing you up in a costume, and you're going to wear this costume. They called her Miss B because she looked like Miss B in the television show. And so we're dressing you up in a honeybee costume, and you're going before the city council. And so I did. I dressed in a honeybee costume, and I went before the council, and they just cracked up, and they gave us the money. Yeah. Carolyn was very politically savvy.
Is Carolyn still with us?
She's Carolyn Prater, married to Steve Prater, ex-sheriff Steve Prater.
Okay, I never put that together. I should have. And she's helped him politically tremendously. In fact, a little follow-up story is I was going back to Junior League many years later to get money for the Robinson Film Center. And Carolyn was there with Steve. Steve was doing a proposal for Safety Town. And Carolyn had engineered politically, and she just knew how to do it. And I knew as soon as, I didn't know that they were coming. And when they came and I looked, I thought, no way they're giving me money. They're going to give it to Steve Prater, which they did. And they gave the money for Safety Town instead of to Robinson. Yeah. But so anything else on Sci-Port, or you want to move to your next big life project and contribution? No, it's up to you.
Let's move.
Okay.
Let's move.
So,
well, anyway, so just bottom line about our site, because I didn't finish that, is we really fought hard for our site, and we ended up where it's located now in the corner of Lake. And I think it is a good site. There is some empty space. Well, we were under construction. This is interesting. And somebody realized, not in our organization, in the city, realized we didn't own the land. The city didn't own the land. KCS owned the land. So they quit. I mean, we're under construction. They quit work a deal with KCS for trading, and that's why there's that closure on Lake Street. That was part of the deal. In case you're wondering why there's that barricade, that KCS wanted it, and that was part of the trade. So, okay.
All right, before we move into the film center,
Okay.
just for people listening, you weren't making any money doing this. Just for young people who are listening to this, who have what it takes to do what you did, who are in their 20s or 30s and really want to give back to their community or really want to have a lasting impact, like what kept you going, or what words of wisdom do you have for them? Like, how did you, in spite of everything you've just talked about, persevere?
Because I really wanted it. I wanted the Science Center because I thought it could do so much for these young people. And we need scientists. Well, you don't just become a scientist at age 18 or 19. You've got to have some interest prior to that. And if these elementary teachers are saying, we're struggling with science, we're really strong in reading, writing, arithmetic, and grammar and all, but not science. I saw a real need, and I thought, I think I can help fill this need. And I love working with sharp people, and we had the best team possible. I mean, you couldn't have asked for more dedicated and brighter people to work on a project, and it was just challenging and fun, and to, when I see the Science Center, I walk through it, I think, oh my gosh, our group made that happen, and it's just very rewarding. Yeah.
All right, so let's switch gears.
Okay.
Most people would call it a day after everything you just described, but you got roped in or got involved in something equally difficult. So tell me about Robinson Film Center.
Okay, it really wasn't equally difficult. It wasn't nearly as difficult a project. First of all, it's not as big or as expensive a project. And secondly, the timing was good because there was interest in film in Louisiana. But the way I got interested in is your daddy and I had gone for years to Dallas for weekends to see good film, and we would just OD on film. Sometimes we didn't even eat dinner out. We would eat dinner at the concession stand in a movie theater. We'd see as many films as we could see.
And let me interrupt. When you, because good is subjective. When you say good film, at this time you were mostly watching international films and you were watching independent films that the more mainstream cinemas weren't carrying.
Exactly. We were at art and film houses in Dallas, not mainstream film theaters, totally art film houses. And just to go back, when I was in college, the neat thing for me, coming from a little town that had one theater and, one showing of one theater.
We're not going to go a lot into her history, but she's from Sunflower County, Mississippi, Moorhead, Mississippi, to be specific. Is that right?
Right. And so in college, we had in our music building maybe a couple of times a month or more foreign films. And so I was fascinated. It opened a whole new world to me that I didn't even know existed. And I learned to read subtitles, thank goodness, because now that I'm hard of hearing, I watch all movies with subtitles. But I learned to do that very young. But anyway, so Jeff Hendricks and Bruce Allen, who had film series at Centenary, showing films in actually a lab, with
at Turner, in the Turner Arts Building, right?
Yes, but it had, it was like a classroom with
stadium seating.
Yeah, stadium seating. And so we had done that for a number of years. And then there was a film club and that we went to. And so Jeff and Bruce said they wanted to have a permanent film center to show the best in film. And they asked Lane
Let me
Crockett,
interrupt one sec. So just to orient us, we're probably late 90s, early 2000s at this point?
Yes. Probably 2001, maybe. Okay. Anyway, they were talking to Lane Crockett and saying, how do we make this happen, that we create a film center here? And Lane Crockett said, you ask Sylvia Goodman. She'll do it. She loves film. And so they came to me and said, Lane Crockett said you would do this. Will you do it with us? And I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'm finished with Sci-Port and I'm ready for another project. And so I said, but only if I'm the executive director. I said, I do not take orders from people well at all. I always think I know better than everybody else.
Always have thought that and still do, right?
Yeah. And I said, I don't function well. I'm either a general or I'm nothing. And they said, fine with us, because we're not generals. We're fine with that. And we don't know how to fundraise. And I said, okay, if you let me guide it, and I said, first thing we got to do is find a place for me to be located. I can't work from home on this. So they got me an office right where the VOA was, on Highland, in the Highland Center. And I had to pass all the little children in daycare to get up to my office. And then we had no office furniture. So Bramer, I had friends that I just started calling, and I called Bramer Engineering, and they said, well, we're totally remodeling and getting rid of furniture and all. If you want it, we'll donate it and take the write-off. And I said, perfect. So that's how we got our furniture to do the office. And we stayed there, actually until the building was built. But after a year or so, I said, I can't be the executive director and the campaign chairman. It's too much. And so we hired John Grinley as our executive director, who was perfect for the job. And also we hired Mike McSwain as our architect. And
John, if I'm not mistaken, just for those listening, I think was also the first director of Cohab when it opened.
Exactly. And
later.
Yes, later when he left Sci-Port.
When he left the film center.
I mean film center, I didn't mean Sci-Port, yeah. And so we started fundraising, and we started having events, and we had parties. You were at one of the parties at David Myatt's place. Which is
where I was reunited with Julie, who is now my wife, and we started dating soon after that.
Right.
So that was 2005.
Was it? Okay. Yeah, but we started having events like that to fundraise. And then, again, I started trying to get government funds. And so I went down to Baton Rouge again and Foster Campbell and Billy Montgomery, again, were big helps, as some others. They were not the only ones, but they were the main
And
ones.
new mayor at that time. This was under Hightower's administration.
And Keith was very supportive. He was a really big help to me. At first, I didn't know him, and the first time I walked into his office and saw him, I thought, not sure this guy. And I said to him, do you like art films? And he said, no, not really. And I said, well, this is a project. The film industry is revving up in Louisiana. And I said, even if you don't like art films, I think we can be a big help to the film industry. And he got on board because he understood that. He understood business. He was a business person.
Let me interject one more time. So just for people listening, I think, if I'm not mistaken, just through previous lives, that the Louisiana film tax credit legislation first passed or first went into effect in 2002, if I'm not mistaken. So just to kind of connect all the dots.
And Louisiana was the first state in the U.S. to have film credits, too. And you were in L.A., and you were trying to make a film, and I can remember saying, come home, you can raise the money in Shreveport because of our film credits, and you probably thought, that's just my mother, she just wants me to come home.
I did.
Yeah, but you came home and you did raise the money and you made your film, and it did very well, and it's still on Amazon.
That's right.
Right now.
That's right.
The Last Lullaby, I'll give you a plug.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was a great film.
Thank you. I'm proud of it.
Yeah, and the film industry got going in Shreveport, and so then we needed a commission here to put everybody together. We had a film person in the Convention and Tourist Bureau, but what we really needed was more of a coordinating commission. And so I agreed to chair that. And we, had all kinds of film people, workers. We had on the commission. Anyway, we were kind of a clearinghouse, and we helped the film industry. And so the film industry took an interest in the film center, and we actually had Kevin Costner did a concert to benefit the film center as well as the guitar program, and we brought in different actors to the film center, and anyway, we raised money through state funding and some federal funding.
And lots of significant local private donors and support.
Yes, the list is unbelievable. Let's see, I have it here, of the funding. Anyway, I thought I had the breakdown of the funding, but we had, I'll tell you the funny story about why it's named the Robinson. So I had a friend, Sue, whose husband had been roommates with Bill Robinson. I'd never met Bill Robinson, really had never heard his name, to tell you the truth. And so when he bought the big house on Ockley, I said, who bought that house? And they said, Bill Robinson. I said, who's Bill Robinson? Oh, you don't know Bill? Well, of course, he had a lot of friends here that went to Byrd with him. And Sue Towery's husband, Bill, was his college roommate as well as his friend from Byrd. And so I said to Sue, who is he? She says, well, he's one of the founders of
DHL.
DHL. And I said, well, how do I get to meet him? And she said, well, he has a football game at lunchtime at his house and with his old friends. He doesn't play, but they come and eat lunch and throw footballs in the yard. And she said, well, why don't you pick up muffalettas and bring them to all the guys? So I said, okay. So that was my first time I went to meet him. And I just met him for 2 seconds. And I said, I brought you buffalo lettuce. Sue said, this is what y'all needed. And thank you. That was it. So I'm in a meeting months later, or maybe a year later, with Jeff and Bruce and Mike McSwain. And we're looking at and I had told Mike, I said, Mike, I want you to do me a big artist rendering, a big thing, artist rendering of the exterior of the Robinson Film Center with Robinson Film Center. And I want to have it for when I need it. And he said, fine. So we were in this meeting. I got a call from Sue, and she said, Sylvia, if Bill's in town, if you want to meet with him, he's free right now. Can you go over there right now? And I said, absolutely, I'm on my way. So I said to Bill and Mike and Bruce, I said, give me that rendering, and I'm coming back with $500,000. And they said, sure. I said, trust me, I'm coming back with $500,000. So I go to Bill Robinson's, and he really doesn't remember me, but he knows he has an appointment with me. I go in his little den with him. And I walk in, and I just take it out and spread it over the back of the couch. And I said, Mr. Robinson, what do you think of that? He looked at it a minute. He said, yeah, I like it. And he said, hold on. So he goes over to the phone, and he calls his stockbroker, and he says, talk to this woman and give her $500,000. And so the stockbroker says, give me your information. And I give him my information. We get a check for $500,000. And I go back and I tell Bruce, and I think Mike's left by then. I tell Bruce and Jeff, I said, guess what? We have $500,000. They said, you're kidding. I said, no, I'm not kidding. I told you I was going to get it.
It's amazing.
So that's how we got the first big gift. But I was very lucky. Jerry Francis' daughter, Claire, had been out in L.A., as you know, working in TV. And she was now working at the film center. She had moved back home. And so it dawned on me, I'm going to get Jerry to help me raise money because he wants to help Claire, So I called and I asked him, and he said, sure, I'll help you. Well, Jerry was amazing because I really didn't have an in with the oil men, but Jerry did, being one. And he raised a huge amount of money. He raised the most money from private individuals, and I've concentrated on government funding. And
I do want to say, I'm going to interrupt one sec. So people who are interested in more information around what it takes to actually put something like this together, I think the Film Center does a really good job of memorializing all the sponsors. So you can walk in today, walk through the lobby right before you get into the main theater, look to your right, there's a whole wall that lists out all the different donors at all the different levels, and you can see how much of a community-wide effort this took to make this happen.
Yeah, yes. Thank you for mentioning that, yes. So anyway, the Film Center got underway. We had the grand opening. We have classes. We have summer film camps.
I think it opened in 2008.
2008, May 7th, 2008. And at that time, we could have parties on Texas Street. And so every year we had a big party on Texas Street, and that generated interest. But then we really wanted to expand, and the building next door was vacant. And so I said, why don't we buy the building next door? Well, we don't have the money, obviously. And it was for sale for $300,000. And I said, well, I'll get the money, but we need Mike McSwain to come up with, drawings and all, which he did. And so I couldn't go back to the legislature or the city because they had just finished funding. So I decided, okay, I'll go to the feds. And I'd been involved with the Landrews and really several of the federal people. And
when you say the feds, we're talking about the federal politicians.
Right.
The people,
elected officials, federal elected officials from Louisiana. Yeah. And so I went to Washington again, your daddy paid for it, for a week, and met with all of our senators and representatives from Louisiana, had packets to take to them. And yeah, that sounds great. Nothing happened. Year 1. Year 2, I go back, same thing. Oh yeah, we remember. Oh, that's a great project. We're so happy you're doing that, and the film industry's going well. No money. 3rd year, it dawns on me, they're not going to make any effort to do this, but it's their aides that do all the research to find where to insert appropriations into bills. Heck, I'm going to do what I did for the state legislators. I'm going to have a dinner party for the aides, the congressional aides.
So this was Jubin's Chapter 2.
Right, but in D.C.
Right.
So I invited all the aides, told them, gave my case and all. And sure enough, they found a place to insert the appropriation into a bill, and we got the $300,000 to buy the place next door. Yeah, so I just wish somebody would step in and really do work on something. You and I have talked about that it could be investors who go in there, and because Robinson doesn't really need the whole space. They just need some of it for classes, need to expand the lobby, and could work out a deal, but there's just nobody on board right now who's motivated to do that. But I don't think it's a really hard thing to do if somebody just wanted to do it.
And if you're looking at Robinson, it's the space to the left or the space to the right?
To the left.
Okay.
To the right is
the department, the clothing store.
Yeah, and that's who owned the building.
Okay.
That's who owned that building, and that's who we got it from. Yeah. So there's plenty of room for growth. And
the film center still owns it today.
Yes.
Just nothing has materialized yet.
Right. And I'm hoping that someone will take this on as a project, because they don't really need it all. And they could lease out, or it could be a joint venture, and they cannot sell it. That's a government appropriation. You cannot sell the building. And but it could be a win-win situation. For either just a private law firm or whatever, a retail, but it has to be someone who's willing to invest. And the DSDC and the DDA stepped up really big to create the Robinson, and they have money. And I think they would step up and help if asked properly, and there was a plan in place, because they want downtown developed. That's their purpose.
Sure.
And people don't realize that they got money from the taxes that downtown building owners pay. The city tax goes to there. So it could be used, to help finish out that building. So that's my hope, that there will be someone that will step up to do that, some younger person, because I don't really think it's a huge project. I think it's very doable if somebody's just willing to give the time and energy,
Well, okay. As you look back on, these two extraordinary accomplishments we've been focused on today, is there anything else that you want to say, mention? I know I've said this before, we started this entire Shreveport-Bossier, My City, My Community, My Home initiative in February of 2022 with a panel of you, Bubba Raspberry, Wanda Thomas, and at the time, Councilman Nicholson. So you've been at the genesis of my work, period, in trying to serve the community and in this entire initiative. But is there anything just as we wrap up today, just thinking back, reflecting, sharing these stories that you'd like to discuss?
I would just like to say Shreveport has had an extraordinary number of outstanding leaders and civic leaders and men and women who've been willing to put in hours of time and talent to make this a great city. And I hope that the young people coming along will take up the baton and continue the work of the people my age and older, because I used to work with extraordinary people. I think of someone like Frank Moore. Frank got Schumpert to do a whole gallery at Sci-Port. He was on the Schumpert Foundation board. And Virginia Sheehy, who really gave a huge gift to the Robinson.
John D.
Carruthers and John D. and his son Whit. But John D. helped build the Montessori school. And physically, he was on the roof, hammering and nailing with Donald Hathaway, who was sheriff at the time, and they're up there hammering. Well, I want to see the younger people take up this mantle because they really have had extraordinary examples set for them. So I'm hoping to see all of that.
Well, I've had an extraordinary example set for me, so thank you for this, but far more important, thank you for all of that. And thanks for being here. Love you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Love you too.